Good evening, 49er faithful. The Beards are back in town. Randon and Rob back at it. Randon, welcome back. You had a couple of weeks off, man. Are you fired up to be back? What's the energy that you're bringing back into the show? Are you rested? Are you ready for the season at this point? Is Randon in prime game time shape?
That's what we're talking about. Let's do it. I'm excited. The Beard's back. 2 weeks off. I was happy. Went to an A's Rangers game. Had my mom in town. Just had some time to myself. It's good. It's the dead period. You battle through like a trooper. Like you.
That's right.
You drank some salt water. You put on a helmet. You got out of the trench and you went through the tough times. I took it easy and had some fun with the fam. But I'm excited to be back. Beards are back. I'm wearing the A's hat for Paul Blackburn, first All-Star tribute for him. So congratulations on him making the All-Star team. But I'm excited, man. I have so many thoughts running through my head. It's like I got to have a factory to filter them all because I'm just so pumped to be here.
Hey, man, I will take that energy. And yes, I mean, for me, no rest for the wicked, right? I'm powering through this dead period like no other. I also had the opportunity, though, to see my folks, which was nice. And it's funny, I see the stories about the Oakland A's, and it's consistently about the cheap ownership. So the most recent one I saw celebrating the All-Star event was clowning the A's for potentially sending their All-Star via commercial flight as opposed to booking him a charter and needing some other organization within the league to step in and be like, no, he can ride with us, dude. It's cool. He doesn't need to fly commercial.
As much as I don't want to bash the A's, the Washington Nationals sent their potential $440 million player on commercial, didn't fly him out either. So
the A's are not alone.
No, but they're cheap MFers. Yeah,
they are cheap. You can't get around that fact. They are definitely cheap.
I never thought I would say thank you for the Houston Astros for anything, but yeah, thank you for flying Blackburn out there on charter.
It's very kind of them. I want to say what's up to those that are here in the chat. As always, we've got the chat popping off for Between Two Beards. Ellis10 Sneakerhead here on the channel coming in to yell, let's go. Chris Royal often here, Sneakerhead of the channel. Rob and Randon, let the epicness begin. Let's get it. We've got Treasure Kisses in the building. Manly Shavers, Raphael 562 Niners, Robert Davis, Victor Mendoza, Shane AZ, 49ers Empire, Peter Lee, all in the building. Melvin Crediford sneaking in there right at the end there. Rob, do you think that the Niners would actually keep Jimmy on his current contract if they can't find a trade partner? Randon, this is our first topic.
Hey, let's get it.
It is about Jimmy Garoppolo, still here, apparently still going to be here for a little while. Got to be patient here. So we have conflicting reports here, it would seem, from Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter. Here's a report from Ian Rappaport that came out yesterday. This is the tweet that he sort of doubled down on today in NFL Live or NFL Now, one of the programs that's out there. Here's the tweet from yesterday. 49ers quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo recently saw Dr. Neil El Atrache for a checkup and is progressing well. San Francisco is thrilled with where he is physically, sources say. The expectation is he'll be fully cleared around mid-August. Perhaps then we'll know his destination. So it seems yesterday seems super crystal clear that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be on this roster until mid-August. I mean, there's really no other way to interpret that tweet when you're reading it by itself, right? When you saw that yesterday, Randon, what was your thought process?
Man, could we have any more Jimmy G news? I mean, I don't feel like I've gotten enough. Like I'm starved.
Very sparing.
I'm starved for conflict here in the Niners news cycle, and I'm glad this came to fruition because it really itched me where I was scratching. And I think it's just been conflict after conflict. Like, who knows? Like, and if it is true that it is rotator cuff, like clap for Jimmy G if they're playing through that. Like, as a baseball player, rotator cuff is no joke. And like to throw a football with that or baseball or whatever, like, yeah, let's clap it up. But then let's like, Shanahan, what are you doing? Like, this guy's got a thumb that's barely hanging on. He's got rotator cuff. Like, play the rook. Like, go for glory. Like,
Randy,
could you
imagine? Still trying to go back and rewrite history and get the rookie in there last year?
I'm putting crystal balls out there. Could you imagine Shanahan's legacy if he went Trey Lance like one playoff game in after Dallas and he led us to a Super Bowl?
Oh my
Like,
God.
could you imagine that big dick energy, just him slapping that on his Hall of Fame career? Like that would be just epic. Like I don't understand.
It would absolutely have been legendary status. I mean, the legend of Trey Lance would have been born. It would have solidified Shanahan's legacy. The team would be favorites to repeat this year around. Now, I mean, all of that is assuming that Lance could have come in last year and lit it up. And certainly we don't have definitive proof of that, but it was a talented roster. You could see him coming in and certainly having success. Certainly, I could have envisioned him having the type of success that Jimmy did. I could have seen Lance doing what Jimmy was able to do in the playoffs.
I do. And I think this is going back to the original question with Jimmy G.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting, right? I think it's all been a play for when he can get traded, which team is he sought after.
Yep.
It's just like a pinup post, right? This is Maxim magazine. Like, let's make Jimmy as appealing as possible.
Right.
Like, when is that going to happen? And both reports are conflicting. Oh, like he can't be there till August because maybe, hey, the Niners don't have to fine him $40 million a day or $40,000 a day if he's injured. And then another report comes out, no, he's fine because we got to get traded. Like, what is the truth?
Right. And here is the Adam Schefter report. So here is the conflicting report that comes out today. Adam Schefter tweets, 49ers officially have given Jimmy Garoppolo's agents, Don Yee and Carter Chow, permission to seek a trade, sources said. Garoppolo has been cleared to start practicing, per team source. 49ers still are expected to exercise caution with him this summer. I interpret that to mean, first of all, let's be clear on the idea that regardless of whether they were, officially granted permission to seek a trade, the Niners have been attempting to trade Jimmy Garoppolo since the end of the frickin' 2021 season. Like, that feels like a fact at this point. But the news here does seem to be Garoppolo has been cleared to start practicing, per team source. This seems to be in contradiction to being fully cleared around mid-August. And I think that the 49ers expected to exercise caution with him this summer. That to me signals the idea that even if he is okay to begin practicing, if he's not fully cleared, they don't have to allow him to practice. He can be on the sideline. They could excuse him from camp altogether and say that he's rehabbing with his trainers at that point. So that's my first question for you, Randon. These seem to be conflicting, but if you break it down to those 2 points, that he may have been cleared to begin practicing by the team, and he may not be fully cleared to resume all physical activities until mid-August. Do you believe both of those can be simultaneously true?
No, I don't. I don't think that they can be, because you have conflicting reports. Like, either he's healthy or he's not. Like, either he can throw or he can't. Like, medical news isn't like either you got cancer or you got a cold or you don't. Like, it really isn't. Like, his arm is like, he has to pass a physical.
Yes.
And it goes from there. And the funny thing, during my 2 weeks off, I've been kind of diving into like some salary cap stuff. And like, I'm not a lawyer. And I've been saying this for months, that Jimmy doesn't have anything to do with Deebo's contract.
Yeah.
But now it does. And I've been, the signing bonus, from what I've read, now I'm not a lawyer.
Right. But you do play one on this program. So please continue.
I do one. It goes back to, it can overlap through the original contract.
Okay.
So if his signing bonus plays on this year's cap, so you can equally divide it through the years of the whole contract, but it does play into this effect of him signing this year.
It does.
So I was saying it doesn't have any effect because it's all going to happen next year and all that kind of stuff. Well, I forgot about the salary cap, or the signing bonus. And it does go onto this cap. So the fact that Jimmy is taking this long to get out of there means that they have to be under the cap by March 15th. And that has to play all the way through the 22 season.
Right.
We're well past March 15th.
Yep.
There is no room on the salary cap. So if they want to give Deebo a big signing bonus, they can't, because Jimmy G's on the roster. And at this point, it's like, okay, I understand. Like, hey, is he throwing? Is he not throwing? Jimmy's not on this team, in my opinion.
No.
So I don't give an F. Like, just cut the guy. Like, what are you really realistically getting? A 5th round, a 6th round pick at this point?
That becomes the question.
Go ahead. Sorry, I'm ranting because I'm hyped up.
hyped up on this. Well, I mean, I think that as it plays for me right now, with the Debo situation, as I understand it, with the current salary cap, because of Debo's $4 million salary that already exists this year, when you do renegotiate, it would go up. But I believe the 49ers still have the room to make it work with Jimmy Garoppolo on the books for right now. So I agree that it makes it tight, but I don't think it precludes the 49ers from actually getting the Debo deal done. However, I won't be surprised if Jimmy gets shipped out and then soon after that, the Debo deal does actually come to fruition at that point. I see this as potentially being true. Both of these factors potentially being true. That it could be true that Jimmy has been cleared to start practicing, but in order to get to that fully cleared status wherein the 49ers could cut him without incurring the $7.5 million injury settlement at that point, or injury guarantee, that he would need to be able to practice for X number of consecutive days, right? That you need to be able to get to the point of being healthy enough to practice initially, withstand that practice, and ramp up to full practice activity. So I could see both being true. What I want to hear, the language I want to see from either one of these people, is what's relevant to trading Jimmy Garoppolo. And that is he has been medically cleared and can be traded at this point, or can be released without injury guarantee. Those are the magic words that I want to hear. And until we get those words, it seems like Jimmy's going to be on this roster. The next question I wanted to pose to you is, which of these two scenarios, because it feels to me like one of these came from Jimmy's camp and one of these came from the 49ers. Which one do you think came from Jimmy's camp? Which one do you think comes from the Niners? And what are their motivations there in releasing these two different statements?
I think Jimmy's the camp is like, oh, well, he needs time because he doesn't want to get fined money for missing camp. And then the Niners like, no, let's ship him out. Like, he is ready to go.
Jimmy's good. Jimmy's good.
And I'm looking at it right now, and I want to go back to Terry McLaurin. His signing bonus is $5.8 million. The Niners only have $4 million on the top 51 in cap space. So there isn't room for Debo if Debo is expected to sign more than Terry McLaurin. But
that's where you have to take Debo's current salary is $4 million, and they have $4 million in salary cap space. No, so technically they have $8 million.
You add the signing bonus to his already current contract.
But in renegotiating the contract, you can lower his current cap hit from $4 million down to the league minimum of $965,000. So you can basically eliminate $3 million of that salary.
I don't know what Terry McLaurin's original salary was. Yeah. So I'd have to look that up. But it's, for me, it's just like, I don't think that there is room, in my opinion, because I think Debo is going to want more than Terry McLaurin.
That could be true. And depending on how
Terry
they
McLaurin, he is
this,
not Debo Samuel.
People have floated out that Debo may want more up front, that the Niners may want to put more up front. If you've got someone with injury concerns and you're attempting to sort of sweeten the pot for them, loading up the contract early and giving the team outs later on, maybe the 49ers preferred strategy as well. So I will concede that there are absolutely ways in which the contract might be structured that wouldn't currently fit underneath the salary cap. My argument would be that current moves can be made and the existing salary cap available is enough to get a deal done for Debo Samuel. Whether it's the deal the Niners want or the deal that Debo wants, completely different question as it comes to it.
I like the different part of this. And Jerome M., your sneakerhead, shout out to him, that the last comment in the chat so far is they won't practice Jimmy. And I think either one of these leaks lead to that, right? So if he's tradable, he's not a competition for Trey. If he's not in camp, he's not a competition for Trey. This leads to me that Trey Lance is the quarterback, right? So there's not going to be any conflict whatsoever, regardless of which one of these reports are true.
Yes, I agree with that. That was one of the things I was going to bring up. It does feel like this signifies Trey as QB1. I would argue that kind of unofficially already happened with the sequence of events that have played out, and that this still doesn't feel sufficient in declaring it loud and proud, but it does further send the message, as all of the 49ers moves that I've interpreted this offseason have said, is that, hey, Trey is QB1 going forward. I still want to hear it. Do you want to hear it coming from Shanahan's mouth? Do you want to hear him loudly and proudly say, hey, Trey is starting week 1?
Yeah, I want like a hype video. Like I want a 2-minute hype
give
video.
Me the hype video
of Trey Lance throwing all kinds of like sidearm passes, rolling out game footage.
Yes.
And at the end, it's Kyle Shanahan with his like silver fox beard from all the stress that he's been under for this situation, saying Trey is your quarterback one for the San Francisco 49ers video. Like that's
I think we need you to be the audio of that video. You may need to just come up with this video and send it over to Santa Clara to get this ball rolling because they don't seem to be on that one. I want to go to a couple of buy-sell segments around Jimmy Garoppolo. Before I do, I'll just give my thoughts on the motivations from each side here because I agree with you. I think it is Jimmy's camp that is putting out the initial report that comes out yesterday from Ian Rappaport. And I would guess that his motivation is that I want to be released. My best option for finding where it is I get to go, negotiating my own contract and landing in the proper spot is to be fully released and be able to negotiate with whatever teams are out there so that they don't have to give up draft capital. And if he can shorten the window within which the 49ers can trade him by moving the start of that window to mid-August, it may force them into a hard spot where they say, well, to hell with it. We're just going to release Jimmy Garoppolo because we're not going to be able to trade him after mid-August, barring some fluke injury. But then I look at the 49ers and they're like, hey, no, Jimmy is healthy enough that you can take a look at him now. The trade window is open and we are making deals here. Like, so it is competing storylines there. Here are the Athletics cases for 4 potential trade destinations. Now, Randon, I will foreshadow this by saying some of these haven't changed a whole lot, but the Athletic did a good job of putting this out today with the relevant information for each one of these trade scenarios. So I'm going to read them out one by one. I want to get your take on whether you're buying or selling that particular destination as a potential landing spot for Jimmy Garoppolo. The first one they throw out are the New York Football Giants. They cite the fact that the Giants declined Daniel Jones's 5th-year option, final year for him. Prove it or bust. Signed Tyrod Taylor this offseason to a 2-year, $11 million contract. And so they said, well, why would they? The beat writer for the Giants said, well, only in case of an injury. So this is a potential scenario where the beat writer for the Giants believes this is only happening if something happens to Daniel Jones or to Tyrod Taylor. And then he goes on to say that, hey, there's less than $5 million in cap space available for the Giants. All those factors involved. Do you see the Giants as a viable trade partner for Jimmy Garoppolo?
I do. I've been saying this for a long time. And I think that you look at the type of quarterback that Trey Lance is, and, people were saying like Daniel Jones, that'd be blasphemy to compare them, but he's a running quarterback. He is. And he's not very accurate. Trey Lance hasn't been accurate. And so like for a backup and you're taking his salary or part of his salary to make it work, whatever, I think Jimmy G could go there. And you look at Kadarius Toney is Deebo Samuel light. Like he has very good open field quickness. He very good after the catch. He's just dismissed with his mental side of the game is what it seems. Like, I don't know the guy, but it seems that way. And if you can feature him in the offense, I think it'd be great. I mean, get the ball in his hands, and Jimmy G could do that. Then you have Kenny G, Smooth Routes Galladay, that had signed that whole contract, and he needs to be featured. I think Jimmy G is good at getting people the football, whether that is down the field like everybody wants or whatever. He's good at getting people the football and letting the athlete do their job. And he's way better than Jones. And you have to be able to make some headway under Saquon Barkley's rookie contract. Like it really is. Like you ponied up for Kenny Galladay, maybe a mistake, probably a mistake, definitely a mistake. But Kadarius Toney's still there under a small deal, and they invested in offensive line. Like he seems like the ultimate choice. Plus the NFC East is garbage. Most of the time. Now, a lot of Eagles fans and Commanders fans will say that, hey, our teams are on the rise or injury or whatever. Good, prove it to me. But right now, that division seems wide open.
Yeah, Chris Royal coming in saying, I've been saying Giants as well. He is better than Jones, in my opinion. Amp, the Carolina Niner, is psyched about it. Sign the deal. Jimmy to the Giants. I have a feeling Amp may be saying that about each of these 4 potential destinations. Just amped to get Jimmy out the door. I got to put this one as I believe it as the destination for Jimmy Garoppolo. Feels a hell of a lot more like a destination that could be if Jimmy gets cut. because of that salary cap space seems problematic. The next one that we're going to go buy and sell on is the Houston Texans. Obviously a name that has been bandied about with regard to trading for Jimmy Garoppolo, continually mentioning the connection between Jimmy and Nick Caserio. Currently the Texans general manager was with New England when the Patriots drafted Jimmy in 2014 as the director of player personnel. People like to continually cite that connection between the two, saying, hey, he may want to bring Jimmy G on board. Houston does have 2 third-round picks in this upcoming draft. The beat writer suspects that it could be they'd be willing to part with one of them in a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. He does mention that Davis Mills feels like the favorite to start after a reasonably successful rookie career. You know, one of the better careers for rookie quarterbacks last season, wasn't wildly successful, but then does point out that there's only $9 million in available cap space currently. So this one feels a little more doable on my end. Are you buying or selling the Houston Texans as a potential trade partner?
Who's taking up all that cap space with only $9 million available for the Houston Texans? Jesus criminy. Like, did they pay Brady Cooks for like $50 million a year? I mean, come on. Davis Mills is my guy. And I was saying this, you know, this was before Between Two Beards, but I was saying that they should have rode with Jimmy and drafted Davis Mills in the 3rd round as the QB apparent, because I thought that Jimmy was good enough to keep us successful, but not good enough to take us to the promised land. Yeah. Davis Mills with a 5-star QB1 recruit out of high school, just got injured multiple seasons at Stanford. Then COVID happened, and he really didn't have a chance to play in multiple games. But he's a 5-star recruit for a reason. Has a hell of an arm. He's accurate. He's attentive in the pocket. And he was the best rookie quarterback last season. And I don't think he was even a competition. Everybody coming out with Mac Jones. Right. They had a way better team. Like, way better. For him to post similar stats on a per game basis than Mac Jones says something when they're playing with the Houston Texans. It does. And for me, I wouldn't trade for Jimmy G because they're not competitive. Like, Jimmy G needs to go to a team that has a chance to make the playoffs, because that's what Jimmy G will give you. Yeah. Like, why are you trading for Jimmy G if it's not in a win now move? By the way, I was, correct in my prediction. Amp, the Carolina Niner, very excited about Jimmy to Houston at this point. Sign the deal. Amp He's says, very amenable. Yeah. Yes. It doesn't matter where you're shipping, Mr. Garoppolo. Just ship him. Yes, so I'm with you on that one. I see this as a potential destination. I think there's like 7 or 8 teams that will call Jimmy's agent if he's cut by the Niners. I would put the Texans at the top of that list. I mean, beautiful situation to bring in Jimmy and allow him to compete with Davis Mills. You trade for him, now you've got to start him. The fan base is going to clamor for it. It upsets the pecking order with Davis Mills, doesn't give him a real shot. If you can sign him on the cheap as a backup, you can sell that to the fan base. It can be a true competition. You can allow the rookie, the second-year quarterback to compete. Now, the next one that comes up is the obvious, the Cleveland Browns. They do say in the article, only in the case of a Watson suspension that spans half a season or more. They also call out the idea that the plan as of right now is Jacoby Brissett. And the argument to be made there is, how much better is Jimmy Garoppolo over Jacoby Brissett? Is it a big enough difference, a big enough delta to trade away an asset and to eat up a lot of your remaining a lot of your remaining cap space? They do point out that the Browns have like this unbelievable amount of cap space, but that was very intentional, and their intention was to roll it over into 2023. They plan to use that space. They just didn't plan to use it this season. This one is the name that everybody's throwing about, and it feels like a lot of 49ers fans are hanging their last hope on this one. Do you put the Cleveland Browns as a buy or sell for a trade partner? I feel it's a buy. I think the fact that you're looking at a team, Niners switching his opinion up. And the Carolina Niners on board with your assertion here. I think the fact that it all depends on Watson, right? And that's obviously the easiest statement to say. But you got to believe that the Browns organization have a suspension game in mind, right? Is it 4 games? Is it 6 games? Is it 8 games? Is it 10 games? Like, what amount of games makes them trade for Jimmy Garoppolo? And for me, I think it's only if it's a season, because he's way better than Jacoby Brissett, and they have to make the playoffs this year. Yeah. Like it for me, that team is like, oh, they're good, but they disappoint. They're good, but they disappoint. Oh, this person's injured. Like for me, it's no excuses anymore. They got to make the playoffs, and Jimmy G will help that team make the playoffs.
Yeah,
because you have
you
have the number one offensive line. You have 2 top 15 running backs, in my opinion, when Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb.
Yes.
You have wide receivers who are budding that you can get them the football in space. Amari Cooper is one of the best route runners in football, and you could feed him day in and day out.
Right.
They have Njoku is a joke of a tight end, but they never featured him. So they paid him all this money, and Jimmy Garoppolo can get a person the football if he's open. So
yeah, in particular, a tight end over the middle of the field. That is right in his wheelhouse.
So for me, it's like, okay, that's a sitting duck there. And you have a bunch of question marks in that division. You have the Bengals who surprised everybody, but is that a fluke or is that legit?
Right.
You have the Ravens who have their 2 best running backs coming off for supreme injuries. Lamar Jackson didn't have the greatest season. They have other injuries elsewhere. Like I read an article the other day, like, will the Ravens compete? Well, that depends on if all their 6 or 7 starters come back from heavy injury.
Right.
And,
how they look.
Like, how they look. So it just, that whole division is just open, in my opinion. And I think Jimmy Garoppolo could lead them to a playoff spot.
I agree. This one feels very viable to me. My concern is, why would a team, if they are the only team remaining in the running that truly is willing to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, you get back to the basic supply and demand conundrum. If there's not any other demand for Jimmy Garoppolo, the Cleveland Browns can sort of dictate the terms or wait until the 49ers are up against a rock and a hard place and force them to a decision of cutting Jimmy Garoppolo. The only question becomes, when is the Watson decision handed down? And do the Browns value getting Jimmy into camp sooner rather than later, allowing him to ramp up prior to the start of the season? And without being able to pick their brains, hard to know that.
What if the term for the suspension is indefinitely and not just a definitive 1 year?
Ooh, in that case, they get desperate. In that case, I think they are coming for Jimmy Garoppolo. To me, I would actually go a little bit further than you. I view the Browns as a very viable trade destination. I agree that if it is a year suspension, they're absolutely in it. I think it probably is in that 10-game range, because if you can't count on your backup to win, 4 out of those 10 games during the suspension, you can't possibly hope that Deshaun comes back and lights it on fire enough to carry you into the playoffs. You've got to be able to win some. And I think you're right that this team is built to win now. And the organization, the fan base, ownership, everyone would be disappointed by a year in which they failed to make the playoffs with the rest of this roster. It would be egg on their face after a sort of highly questionable move to go get Deshaun Watson. So I think we both agree this one is viable. The last one they mentioned is in the division, the Seahawks. They talk about the Seahawks having more than $17 million in cap space, right around there, suggesting that Seattle might part with one of its 2 fifth-round picks if the Niners eat salary. This one screams to me like, why in the hell would the 49ers do that deal? None of that money is guaranteed for Jimmy Garoppolo. Cutting him saves them the entire $24.2 million that remains unguaranteed. If they're only getting a 5th-round pick in return, you're not paying millions of dollars to get a 5th-round pick. I mean, at best, a 5th-round pick is worth what, like
George Kittle?
$4 million?
Oh,
yeah. If you hit on George Kittle, it's worth the full 24.2. But what are the odds of that, my friend?
Not very high. Not very high. I just think, I don't think Seattle's even an option for trading. Like, why would you force that trade? But then again, you're saying, okay, if I cut this guy, Pete Carroll likes to sign Niners, and they're signing for nothing. Why not get a 5th-round pick and make him eat the whole contract at that point?
Yes.
Like, damage them for the future.
If you can get anything for Jimmy while not eating some of the contract, I'm all for it, right? I'm fine with keeping him on the roster until you can get that trade compensation. That's viable to me.
So I think that it's not a possibility. I think they're probably the lead to sign him. But then again, what is the urge for Seattle to compete at that point? Like,
right?
They're not.
Why not just take a year off and go draft their future quarterback? Pete Carroll's earned a gimme year, hasn't he?
Well, Pete Carroll might not live to see 2024, so they might have to compete.
His old 70-year-old ass. No, that's ageism. I'm not saying that. He's spry and young, Randon. I'm not that far away from Pete Carroll. I'm a long ways away from Pete Carroll, thankfully.
Vibrant in spirit, but old in organs.
He chews that gum like a 40-year-old, Randon. He is chomping that gum like a
jaw of steel.
Yes, like a man in his mid-40s. All right, let's get off of this freaking Jimmy Garoppolo topic and talk a little bit about the breaking news of the free agent signing. Now, admittedly, when Brad Graham of the SF Niners reported that the 49ers may have already signed a free agent and reported that it was an first-round draft pick, I will admit I got excited that maybe it was going to be a name that would mean something.
Yeah.
Like, maybe this is, big time shakeup. Is this Odell Beckham Jr.? There was so much speculation going on 49ers Twitter. It turns out to be defensive tackle Robert Nkemdiche. What are your thoughts on the defensive line addition? And what were your thoughts when this was teased, when it was a potential first rounder that we had signed? Where did some of your thoughts go?
Yeah. Wah, wah, wah. I mean, yeah, I was thinking Odell was like, okay, were they going to do like $1 million contract? Because Odell's not ready until like week 14. Like, so they're just signing him to $1 million to get ahead of everybody else. They're going to stash him all year long on the pup and all this kind of stuff. And so like, I was like, okay, great. Like, whatever, Robert Nkemdiche. And then I look up his stats and I'm like, man, he like didn't even play like a full year. Like, after his rookie contract, whether that was COVID or not, I didn't do enough research because it didn't really like pique my interest. And so for me, it's like, okay, like what is going on here now? Disappointment. But who's our D-line coach?
Hey, I'm telling you, he works miracles. Let me bring this in because it's relevant to the point you're making. Emiliano O says, bringing in Nkemdiche almost makes the 49ers appear like they're the last chance university for NFL D linemen. Could go either way. We will see.
I think that you're looking at a guy that was a first-round pick for a reason.
Yeah.
Right? Athletic score, 6'3", 296, can get after it in college, right?
Yes.
Kinlaw hasn't been able to stay healthy. Hassan Ridgeway is just a bottom feeder type, like big body. Like there really isn't anybody else there. And so if you're going straight track meet, like in the center, Mo Hurst injured, all this guy's injured. Like you can move other people in, like Kerry Hyder into the center. Like all that's like hypothetical. Like this guy in camp is athletic.
Yep.
So he's not a run blocker, but if you're going third down package where you're just putting your hand in the ground and say, try to block us, mother effas.
Yeah.
Like this could be the guy that is a reclamation story that signs this cheap little deal and earns $5-6 million next year based on his performance.
That's just it. Is this could be another reclamation process. You are being coached by Chris Kosarik, and he has a track record of success in that regard. Arden Key, Kerry Hyder. Now, Kerry Hyder is back, and when I look at the depth of this defensive line, which we'll get into just in a little bit, we're going to go through some of the exciting camp battles that are coming up next week as we get in preparation for the start of training camp. But this does feel like a high upside type of move. I mean, he has the athleticism. I went back and did a little bit of research and pulled this from the All Seahawks Fan Nation news source. Corbin Smith wrote an article on Nkemdiche in examining whether the Seahawks should re-sign him this year after somewhat of a failed experiment in bringing him in. There was a lot of hype around Nkemdiche in the preseason last year. Then he suffered an injury in preseason, never regained that form, was released prior to week 1, such that his salary wasn't guaranteed for last year. Seattle had only signed him on a 1-year deal anyway. He was relegated to the practice squad and then did get called up and did play in those games, but never flashed what he had flashed in the preseason. It was a fairly disappointing season. So here was from the article by Corbin Smith. After not playing a single down in 2020, Nkemdiche reemerged from the NFL abyss and drew raving reviews from coaches and teammates during Seattle's off-season program and the early stages of training camp. Exhibiting contagious enthusiasm and energy on the practice field, he looked poised to carve out a role in the team's defensive line rotation. Unfortunately, injuries kept him from playing in any exhibition games, and the team wound up cutting him before week 1, eventually re-signing him to the practice squad. It ended up wherein he jumped back to the 53-man roster, played in 9 games, recorded 15 tackles, had a pass deflection, 1 quarterback hit on 230 defensive snaps. So you're not talking about like elite production on any level at any point from Nkemdiche, but you are talking about a first-round talent. You are talking about someone who, from the description there, exhibits contagious enthusiasm and energy on the practice field. When I envision Coach Kocurek, I think of contagious energy and enthusiasm. That feels like a good pairing there between the two. I wonder if this speaks to the season that you might expect from Javon Kinlaw. I admit that there's every chance that Nkemdiche doesn't make the 53-man roster, but I see Panchito Villa coming in here with the comment yelling at us, "Hey, Rob, so do you think Kinlaw will reach 10 sacks if healthy?" I mean, he's very excited about the 10 sacks. I don't either. I think in a healthy season, like a great season from Kinlaw could be like 7 or 8 sacks. I'd be thrilled with a 7 or 8 sack season from Kinlaw. Double digits feels like a stretch there.
For me, it's be healthy and be a 2-down defensive tackle and stop the run. Like, get as massive as possible and stop the run and let somebody else do the pass rushing. Like, get healthy. That's what I want from Kinlaw. Yeah,
a healthy season's a win from the get-go. Do you see, I mean, this is now one of our few 300-pounders. The Niners don't have a whole hell of a lot of them. You mentioned Hassan Ridgeway is in there, certainly Javon Kinlaw being one of those. But this feels to me like, again, he's only 27. He was a first-round talent. He is athletically gifted. He's 300 pounds. Has he failed to show that on the field? Absolutely. But it's all upside because he's a camp body. He may not make the 53, but if he doesn't, it was a minimum. It's probably going to be a minimum contract. It's not going to affect the salary cap as far as cap dollars available because he won't be one of the top 51 contracts. And if they cut him, I'm guessing there's no guaranteed money. So like, it doesn't excite me, but it feels like a move with potential upside. Is that how you see it as well?
It's all potential. And for me, I'm looking at his combine results, right? Like you look at it, 4.87 for 294 pounds, blazing fast.
That's moving.
28 bench press, 35 vertical jump, 116 broad jump. Like, this guy is cooking. Right. Yeah. His prospect grade, according to Next Gen, is 6.8, which is supposed to be a year 1 starter. But if you look at his weaknesses, right, never forced or recovered a fumble, so doesn't have a nose for the football. He had low total in tackles and sacks, so he doesn't have a nose for where he's supposed to be. He ducks his head in initial contact, losing track of the football. Like, it just seems like he's all body but no mind. And now, what is coachable is debatable by everybody else. So what can Kocurek think he can do with this guy? He's like, hey, this guy has got straight athleticism. He's a thumper. I'm going to teach him how to do all this stuff. Great. But by all accounts, he is not great at learning football or knowing football or being where to be in football. He's just an athlete and hasn't been able to dominate based on his athleticism in the NFL because everybody's an athlete.
Yeah, and he has had, that Niner guy points out, has had some off-the-field issues as well. Rob Schuh, tons of talent, was a top college prospect back in high school, never lived up to it, tons of off-the-field issues, can't body, sign a center or a guard, LOL. Honestly, I was looking at offensive linemen. When it was Brad who put this out there, I thought, Brad's always about the offensive lineman. It's got to be an O-lineman that he's signing. I'd have been admittedly more excited about this, but I don't see it as really having any downside. I agree with, this idea of like, oh my God, how many freaking defensive linemen can the 49ers possibly carry? Amp comes in to say, how many defensive linemen are we carrying this year? We're looking at freaking 12. When you look at the number of edge rushers and defensive linemen on this roster, it feels absolutely stacked. And that's a great tee into our next segment. In going into the training camp battles. That's what we do, Randon. That's the true professionals.
You have running back up. Are we going defensive? I thought
we are not going running back. I was just about to say how professional we are, and then I put up the wrong freaking banner. That is the universe telling me to calm down. Me to calm down. Let's start with the defensive line. We're going defense first because we were talking about defensive line. So, obviously, training camp starts next week. The training camp kicks off with veterans reporting on the 26th. So the next time that Randon and I host Between Two Beards, we will be talking about actual training camp practices. That is phenomenal. But that makes it feel as if today is the ideal time for Randon and I to discuss the observations we're going to be looking at when we actually get to that training camp. So we're going through the biggest camp battles, and we just talked about it. That defensive line. Now, I want to suss out for the people in the chat that are following along that we're separating out edge rusher a little bit here because we have a category coming up where we're going to talk about the edge rusher opposite Bosa. So this really is about defensive line depth. This has to do with the center of the defensive line, the defensive linemen, and any edge rushers that may be in the depth rotation there as well. To me, this is a crazy deep group. I think the most talented group on the defense, in my humble opinion, would be the linebackers when I go top to bottom level of talent. But when I talk about the deepest, when I talk about the most talent, just straight bodies, it's got to be defensive line.
There is too many bodies.
Too many.
But I think that a lot of people like get attached to their feelings about some people or what they could be.
Yeah.
And realistically, like this is a good problem to have. Like what they call first world problems. Like this is a first world problem. So, you look at it and it's just bodies for days, but there isn't a lot of big people. And I think there's going to be a lot of guys, which we'll talk about later, is edge number 2.
Yep.
But I think the biggest concern is interior, right? Like you have Armstead is there. People think Kinlaw will be there. He's the most massive body that we have at 320 pounds.
Right.
Hassan Ridgeway is lighter than that. And then this guy that we just signed, Robert, is lighter than that. So you're hoping from a run standpoint that Kinlaw can have the juice necessary to be at least a 2-down defensive lineman.
Yeah.
But for me, they just signed a lot of bodies that have not been there to play interior defensive line. And I think that's might be where the weakness is because the carousel for the edge seems a lot stronger.
It does. I mean, you got names like on the 4th string list of ESPN's depth chart that could end up close to double-digit sacks when you're talking about the edge. I'll save the edge for that category when we hit that next and focus primarily on what you're driving at here, which I agree with. The 49ers, until this signing with Nkemdiche, I would have said, with the acknowledgement that Javon Kinlaw is coming back from injury, and you have to say that it's not a certainty that he bounces back and has an injury-free year. If that were the case, and you go into the season with primarily Kinlaw and Hassan Ridgeway as your 2 big bodies, and you've got question marks about the longevity of Javon Kinlaw, you could have easily made the argument that the Niners did need some reinforcements here, because I anticipate with all the bodies they've got at defensive line that they'll pull that sneaky move of putting Kalia Davis on the PUP non-football injury list or IR. They'll start the season on an injury list, and then he'll be a reinforcement that can come in later in the season if he recovers from the injury he suffered in college. And then I look at some names that don't feel like locks to make this roster anymore. It feels as if you're looking at guys on the perimeter, Kevin Givens, certainly in Nkemdiche, whatever, I can't even pronounce the name right now. Nkemdiche seems like he could be on the outside looking in. Maurice Hurst feels like he would be on the bubble. Kevin Atkins. I mean, there are any number of names that you could see on the outside looking in right now.
I really like Kevin Atkins from the outside looking in. I think he might be the one to watch as taking the spot away. But again, Mo Hurst was there, showed acumen, always injured. Kinlaw, always injured. This guy, Nkemdiche, however you pronounce his name, we'll figure it out. I had it,
and then I lost it. It was one of those where I said it one too many times, and it just started sounding funny.
You know what? I always get into that. Like, this is a little small side story. My name's, obviously Randon, based on what you guys have been watching here. So anytime anybody asks me my name, I have to go to this story like it's Brandon without a B. And by the time I get done with the story, I forgot your name. So like I'm really bad with names. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. Yeah. By the way, now that you know my name, I've completely forgotten yours. Yeah, problematic. All right, so we see that as a very exciting battle, and primarily because of the depth there. It really will be the players, as you scroll down the roster, who are the guys getting cut, who gets stashed on an injury list at this point. And the Niners could actually benefit from a not so severe injury happening to one of those depth players and putting another person on reserve there. Otherwise, there are going to be guys that will get waived and will absolutely get claimed by other teams in the NFL. I have to imagine teams that are thin at defensive line and edge rusher are going to be watching the 49ers on cut down day so they can swoop up whomever doesn't make the roster.
Yeah, and I think it's what's interesting and what people might want to look at is what guys are combination type guys, right? Amenahu, 285 pounds.
Yeah.
So he can play outside on the first 2 downs. He can go inside on an all pass rush down and still be big enough to clog up the interior. Like there's going to be guys that can play hybrids like Kerry Hyder and all these kind of guys. So are they going to get a leg up? Jordan Willis, are they going to get a leg up because of the fact that they can play both positions? They can move in on a pass rush down. Jordan Willis is a special teams juggernaut. And so I just think that it's going to be crazy how they view this, because I think a lot of these backups are just 2 down only, right? Hassan Ridgeway seems like a 2 down only guy. So if you have Kinlaw as a 2 down only guy, you have Ridgeway as a 2 down, like how many more 2 down only guys that can you have? Because they can only keep so many bodies. You're going to need some people that can play inside out.
And you do know that the Niners love versatility. So I think you're spot on in looking at those players that offer that for them. I mean, they cherish that about Eric Armstead. No doubt. It's what makes him so valuable. Absolutely a value for the 49ers in that regard. Schmerica G coming in with this comment. Rob Schuh, first world problems. My yacht's too big. My diamond shoes are too tight. Man, I hate it when my diamond shoes are too tight. Got to take them to the tailor, have them loosened up. Tailors don't work on shoes. We have Nick Bosa for an edge rusher. We do have Nick Bosa for an edge rusher. That is our prime to head into the backup opposite, the bookend opposite of Bosa, talking about edge rushers. We talk about the
this.
depth.
No, this reminds me of a story real quick. So Jeff Bezos built a $500 million yacht in Amsterdam.
Chump change.
And it was in Amsterdam, and he didn't realize that he couldn't get it out of the city without deconstructing a bridge that's been there for over 500 years.
God.
So he was like, oh, I'll convince the city to like deconstruct this bridge and put it back together. And the city was like, go F yourself.
Yeah,
leave your $500 million yacht.
I don't think so. Keep your money.
So now he's like having to figure out how to get this $500 million yacht out. He's going to have to build a $1 billion helicopter to get this $500 million yacht out of the fucking city.
That's miraculous. And I do not feel sorry for Mr. Bezos in the least. I hope his yacht is stuck there forever. I hope he can only go to Amsterdam and sit on it. Let's talk a little bit about that depth that the 49ers do have at that opposite spot. I find this to be fascinating. I'm not buying it yet, but the article comes out today of players coming off of IR soon for the 49ers, and D Ford's still listed there. I don't know if this is just a technicality that he has not actually been cleared such that the Niners can release him at this point without incurring any additional dead money beyond the dead money that is already on the books for D Ford, being a catastrophic contract that sits with the 49ers. But D Ford is a name that at least has to be mentioned. I'm not buying it. I think he is released at some point. But you got D Ford, you got Drake Jackson, who I have to assume makes it. Samson Ebukam, Kamoko Toure, a late addition. You obviously have Nick Bosa. You have Kerry Hyder signing back, and you have Jordan Willis as well. It seems like a very crowded room. Of those names, do you think that the Niners end up keeping 6 edges? And which ones feel most likely to end up opposite of Bosa for that critical pairing of bookend rushers?
I think where I want to start here is Ebukam, and Lee Ving says up there, restructure a cut. And he's an interesting thing here that says, you know, his salary is pretty much cuttable. And so for me, if Ebukam isn't edge number 2, he's not on this roster because there's no reason for the Niners to keep him with that kind of money when they have guys that are comparable. Now, if he comes into camp and blows the doors off and he's legit the number 2 guy, then you got to keep him because the Niners have to win, right? So, but if Toure is better than him or they're both equal or you have like competition, Like, he's the most cuttable guy. Like, and why not save that salary?
And by the way, the name that isn't even on that list there is Charles Omenihu, who I absolutely believe is making this roster. So you're looking at 8 names and it being, 6 spots maybe. I mean, historically, the 49ers have sometimes chosen to keep 5 edge rushers. 6 is a lot. You do have to find room elsewhere on a very stacked roster. I might argue that this feels like a prime time to keep 6 players, but if you take D Ford out of it, because I just until I hear he's staying, I'm not going to believe it. So you got Bosa, Kerry Hyder, Jordan Willis, Drake Jackson, Samson Ebukam, Kimoko Toure, and then you add in there Charles Omenihu. So even if they keep 6 out of those 7, that is one quality name out of that group that isn't going to make it. I tend to think you're right about Samson Ebukam, that if he doesn't claim that spot opposite Bosa, he may not warrant the salary that he's due to make this year. But I've got to say, at this point in time, until I see what Drake Jackson is going to bring to the table, how quickly he can absorb the defense, I have to list Samson as the most likely to take that spot, with maybe Charles Omenihu behind him and Kimoko Toure behind that. I think Samson would have the edge there. That's who's leading the competition going into camp for me. Is that who you have as your favorite if you were betting on this?
And I think that's the point. I think that there is one thing to have to earn a job or overtake the champion, right? They say it in UFC a lot, right? If it's a tie goes to the champion, right? Because you have to earn that spot.
That's right.
I think Ebukam, with his play in the last part of the season, has earned that spot. So it's his spot to lose going into. Thank you, Bro Montana, for that omission there. I think he earned that spot. So it's going to be up to any of those other guys to come in and take it. And then, Omenihu is, like in the age of social media, is posting all these workouts that make me hurt just watching it, let alone trying to do it. He's looking like he's ready to come in. Like he said, like year 2 in the Niners system, I'm going to be a force. Like he's coming in strong. They give Toure money, which is an indicator of a lot of things that they deem him on the roster.
Right.
And then you have Willis, who's a special teams. Like I talked about versatility when it comes to inside out. Well, when you're the 4th or 3rd defensive end, you have to have special teams reliability. Right. And Jordan Willis has shown that, i.e. the Packers game. Like it's going to be a dog fight coming in to the second spot. And Ebukam, if he's not the clear in a way best edge 2, he's getting cut because they need the space.
Is there any way, with these names that we're talking about here, is there any way when one of these guys gets cut? Because it's not if, it's when. I mean, there is an if scenario. If there were an injury and one of these guys were stashed on an injury list, that could change things. But assuming health, somebody's going to get cut from this list. Is there any way that they're not immediately claimed by another team in the NFL?
No, I don't think so. I think that they're going to be at least offered a camp. And so I think the fact that you go in there, my thing is this: is it easier to sign just a 300-pound body that can play 2 downs? Probably, right? So are they going to keep more edge guys that can have somewhat of versatility? Like Omenihu would seem like a guy that's like, okay, I know he's 280 pounds. He might get washed out in some bigger rush offenses. But if you look at our division, the Rams threw more than almost anybody else in the NFL. Yeah. The Arizona Cardinals like to spread it out, so that speed of Omenihu in the defensive tackle spot could be worthwhile. And who cares about the Sea Chickens, right? So, like at that point, you're looking at I would think more than Hassan Ridgeway is more likely to get cut, even though he got signed before any of these guys, which makes no sense. You
could see a situation where the Niners chose an extra edge, cut someone like Robert Nkemdiche because you could potentially allow him to get through waivers, sit him on the practice squad, and then pull him up, to that idea of 300-pounders being easier to find that can contribute on 2 downs. I think you're right about that. Let's hit these 2 super chats before we transition to the next camp battle on defense. We got a couple more on defense and then 4 on offense. Bro Montana, sneakerhead here on the channel, coming in. What's up, 2 beards? Cheers. Cheers to you, Bro Montana. Brosif. Jimmy J. Sneakerhead here on the channel, coming in with a true or false. Randon, I'm going to allow you to take this one first. He says, Rob and Randon, true or false? If Bosa and Drake Jackson can recreate, along with the interior, what the former and D Ford did in 2019, the Niners are going to the Super Bowl. True or false? If Bosa and Drake Jackson can recreate what Bosa and Ford did in 2019, the Niners are going to the Super Bowl.
False. I think it's based on solely upon Trey Lance. I don't think the defensive line will be good enough regardless of Drake Jackson.
Yeah.
I think it's solely upon Trey Lance. Like, okay, if Drake Jackson's a beast, great. We set the sack record. We're over 60 sacks. The defense is dominant.
Right.
But it's going to be solely upon Trey Lance to elevate this team to the next level. And if Drake Jackson isn't that guy, we've just been talking about all the other names that could step in and do that. I think Omenahue could have over 10 sacks. I think
you're right.
I think Ebukam could have over 10 sacks. I think
you're right.
Kamoko Toure could have over 10 sacks.
You're right.
It's just like I don't think it's based on Drake Jackson. Bosa's going to get his. Bosa's going to eat.
Yeah, I don't either, but I'm going to take the other side on this.
Right,
I don't think it's all on Drake Jackson. I think anybody paired with Bosa that could recreate what he and Ford did in 2019 would give them that edge. And I do agree with you in saying that this season's success is primarily on Lance's shoulders. But why I'm then taking this as true is I believe that there's a floor for Lance based on what I've seen so far. If he falls below it, I'll be surprised. And I think if he can hit that floor, if he can perform similarly, provide the same type of value that Jimmy was able to provide last year, and this defense is able to ratchet it up a couple notches, both in sacks, as this would indicate, but also in the potential turnovers that this might force and just being a dominant defense with an improved special teams. I see all of those things coming together. So I'm dragging in some other beliefs by me into this hypothetical here, but I'm saying that this could be the final piece that pushes this team over the end because it was such a night and day difference in pass rush efficiency when both Bosa and Ford were operating at peak 2019 levels. If we can sustain that throughout an entire season, I could see us repeating like we did in 2019.
I do too, and I don't like plugging other people's shows, but if you go on and watch, was it a Locked On 49ers? They had Pepper on as a long snapper. Great interview. He got me hyped about the special teams this season. Like, I think that group could be a top 15, top 10 group based on his hype. Like, I'm all on the hype train there. I'm all aboard. I've already ordered a meal, grabbed 2 beers already. Like, I'm ready to go on the special teams, and the defense is going to be good. I think this is going to be a good year, and I think ultimately, yes, it does rely on Trey Lance, but I think the rest of the team is going to be ready to accept him if he is God level, like a lot of people think he could be.
Yes. And that is, I mean, if God level, then we're winning the Super Bowl. But even if just good, even if just serviceable, I see that as a likely scenario in combination with this particular hypothetical that pushes the Niners back to that relevance of the Super Bowl. I just want to throw in, I saw a request from one of the Sneakerheads Treasure Kisses that I answer a question, but I'm not seeing it at the moment. Can you copy and paste it back into the chat? And Randon and I will get to it in just a moment. We're going to continue rolling through the camp battles. We're still on defense here. We are going to talk about the cornerback position. It feels like the Niners invested here and now have depth, right? I mean, you have Charvarius Ward, you have Emmanuel Mosley, you have Ambry Thomas, you potentially have the resurgence of Jason Verrett. I don't know how much you can count on that, but it feels like depth here. It goes from what felt like a position of weakness where we had to pull in guys off of the street last year that were not completely serviceable. I'm looking at Josh Norman here, even though he did have his famed peanut punch and was able to generate those fumbles, but wasn't able to contribute much on the coverage standpoint. And obviously, you got to wonder who's going to claim that nickel spot, right? Is it going to be a situation where you have Diamador Lenore stepping up? Is it going to be Samuel Womack? Is it going to be Darquez Denard? So there are a lot of unsettled pieces. I think the only one I'm certain of, Randon, is Charvarius Ward feels like he's locked in as cornerback 1.
I'm locked in with Mosley too.
Okay. You think Mosley's starting the opposite of Charvarius Ward as a lock?
So what we just talked about with the last group, right? You have who the coaches think will get the first team reps right out of camp.
Yeah.
They have the lead, and I think that's Mosley.
Yeah.
Like, Verrett's not getting reps right out of camp with the first team defense. Like, he's going to have to
got to work his way back into it.
He's going to have to work his way. He's coming off an injury. So at most, he's ready to go by the end of training camp. That's not going to be enough to get him a starting job. Now, does Mosley get injured during partway through the season and Verrett comes in and dominates and then doesn't give up the job? That would be the most likely thing for me.
Sure.
But I don't think there's a scenario in Doctor Strange's universe that gives Verrett a chance to start right out of camp.
That's a fair argument. I do think that when both are healthy, that Verrett is the better of the two between he and Mosley. But the when healthy is a big statement when it comes to Jason Verrett, and he is coming off another serious injury. It does appear he's going to be ready for camp, but to your point, how quickly does he ramp up? Does he experience any setbacks? Is he offered any of the first string reps? If he's not, it's going to be very difficult for him to lay claim to that spot from Emmanuel Mosley. It does feel likely that at some point during the season, one of the two starting cornerbacks will get nicked up. It's the average within the NFL is every player tends to miss about 2 games each season. Some of that is spread out because some players miss the entire season and some miss none, but the average being 2. So there's every possibility one of those 2 starters gets nicked up and you see him come in, and Verrett may not let up the position at that point. When he gets the opportunity, he has the talent to show that he belongs out there. I have to concede, though, even as much as I want him to lay claim to that starting role, as much as I've predicted that he leads the team in interceptions, which was a big, bold prediction by me, considering the fact that he may not even make the 53-man roster. But you know why I did it, Rendon. You know I got the cleats. You know I need the cleats. Yeah. I need the cleats signed, and I need Verrett to know I had faith in him this whole time. And I do. I still think he earns that spot at some point. Admittedly, the nickel cornerback spot is the more interesting one for me. That is the position that I've got my eye on. That I really have no idea who is going to lay claim to it. I like Matt Barrows' hypothetical that Emmanuel Mosley could slide inside and you would have Ambry Thomas opposite of Charvarius Ward in that scenario, or in a healthy Jason Verrett scenario that Jason Verrett could be in there as well. Do you have a lead dog in the nickel cornerback position?
I've talked about this before. I think that Mosley is interesting, and I agree with Barrows, and I agree with Kroc, who said the same thing, that he sees Mosley having the skills to play nickel where Ambry Thomas does not. Like he has that boundary level corner, and so if they really think that Ambry Thomas is taking that next level, and you have 3 top man corners, which is what we all want to see. Like most of the teams in the NFL play 3 wide receivers. So if Mosley thinks that he can go in and out, by all means do that, because then you're putting your best athletes on the field at all times. Right. And then if Verrett can take that next step, which I think is a big gimme, I think that then you're even better, right? And then you have 4 guys coming in there. To me, I think that this linchpin of this defense is going to be, okay, how many takeaways can Charvarius Ward get?
Right.
Because he's a body man corner. He's not a takeaway corner according to his stats and within his career. But he's never played with a defensive line this good. So can he start getting those takeaways? Can Emmanuel Mosley start getting those takeaways? Or are we just going to be a defense or a DB group that is just stopping everybody, but we don't have the ability to turn it over? It remains to be seen. And I'm quite intrigued on what you think about maybe the nickel spot being that spot where you take a chance on a guy that has the ball skills to maybe level out the defense.
Yeah. In 2019, it was Richard Sherman pulling in 3 or 4 picks, and then it was K'Wan Williams, second on the team at that nickel position, pulling in some of those turnovers. And that was the most turnovers we have had in the past 3 years. So I do think that maybe you take a chance on that nickel position there. And I love Melvin's comment here. Can you imagine a healthy Verrett as a backup cornerback? That would mean that we've got a fierce secondary. I agree. It would speak to the quality of the starting two if you've got a healthy Jason Verrett backing up. I want to get to this before we transition to the last camp battle.
I want to talk about that real quick. I think
this one from Melvin. Yeah, hit it up.
I think that a lot of people forget that there's 17 games.
Right.
Like there really is 17 games, and like most of the players on the lineup will not play all 17.
Nope.
And so you need depth, and like this is 100% correct. If Verrett can play 2 or 3 games as a starting corner at that caliber and help this team go transition through the season, right? The middle of the schedule we've talked about on this show is brutal.
It is.
Like what if we lose Mosley or Ward for those 3 or 4 games? Like you got to feel confident in Verrett playing that level of football for that short period of time.
Yeah, you don't want to go up against the Chargers or the Chiefs or the Rams without two healthy starting cornerbacks. That's for sure. I wanted to get to that comment from Treasure Kisses, bringing that in. It was about the hypothetical. Jimmy to the Giants for Tyrod Taylor. So that would allow within the Giants structure, they still would be a little light on cap because they signed Tyrod Taylor to a 2-year, $11 million contract. I don't know what percentage of that hits the cap this year versus next, but let's just say it's half and half. So $5.5 million on the cap this year. The Giants have less than $5 million in cap space available. So those two combined would be just over $10 million in trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. That would require the Niners to eat $14.2 million or Jimmy to renegotiate his contract down. I just don't see the Giants as a likely trade scenario. Hypothetically, I see them as interested if Jimmy is cut, but I say no if it's a trade. Randon, what say you in this hypothetical?
I think a trade could work here. I think Tyrod Taylor you'd have to bring up money back, like or the Giants would have to eat some of Tyrod's contract as well as take on Jimmy's contract. Like, do they believe that they're contenders in that level? I think where Treasure's coming at is, could you imagine a better backup than Tyrod Taylor? A lot of people wanted him to be signed instead of Nate Sudfeld, right? And a lot of people wanted him to be signed instead of Sudfeld. But now you're going into, they drafted a 7th round guy. In Purdy, that you have a guy who's in Sudfeld who's making all pretty much guaranteed money. Like it doesn't seem like you're going to be eating regardless. Like if Tyrod makes the roster, Sudfeld, that money is guaranteed regardless of where he's at. Like you're just wasting money at that point. I think there's got to be a lot of give on the Giants part of this deal to make it work. And now if Giants in the ownership and the head coach, in his first year want to make a splash and get going, then great. Like if they want to wait till next year, which is supposed to be a high quarterback draft class to kind of tank and set himself up for his quarterback,
right?
Then maybe they just say, hey, Daniel Jones, be as bad as you've been and we'll get a top 5 pick and let's go on to next year. Like we'll see how that works out. I could see them doing that, tanking and then trading away Saquon at the deadline, eating, Galladay's contract. If Kadarius Toney's not interested, like it could be solely him like going to a team just because he's not interested in playing for the Giants. Like they have a very interesting way to just tank because they gave away their best cornerback pretty much for nothing because they cut him. So, like, are they really interested in competing? That's seem just like it.
Like that move in combination with this one would seem to be in contradiction, right? It doesn't seem to jive together. So I see that as an unlikely scenario, but certainly acknowledge it as a possibility if both of the front offices get creative.
If they think Jimmy's the guy, they could extend him and make the $27 million. Like way cheaper, right? Like
absolutely. None of it is guaranteed. So any team can come in and renegotiate the entirety of that contract, to Randon's point there. Let's close out the defense before we transition over to the camp battles on offense and talk a little bit about safety. This one to me feels very clear cut. I mean, obviously Jimmy Ward is going to be the safety on the one side. And then you're looking at another situation where it feels like you have a pretty clear-cut first guy who's going to get all those first reps in Talanoa Hufanga, and then George Odom, Tarvarius Moore, and Leon O'Neal Jr. competing for the other available spots. I would guess that the 49ers keep 4 safeties, but I think there have been times in the past where they have gone with 3 and loaded up at the cornerback position or at the linebacker position with someone they felt in a pinch could play safety if need be. And so I see this as a scenario where if I'm betting, I'm laying down big money on Huff claiming that starting role.
I think so. I really don't think that there is a really camp battle here because you have Odom, who's a special teamer that they brought in. He's an all-pro. He's making it. So then you have one other roster spot. You have the Barnacle and Deontay Johnson, who plays a combined corner, nickel, and safety role. Like
dude can fill them all.
Yeah. I mean, he's filling all the holes. Is there really a battle there? Like as much as I want to see Leon O'Neal on Instagram just charging away at all his workouts and like I'm rooting for that guy top notch.
He is talking.
I'm rooting for that guy top notch. Like, is there really a spot here? Because there's a 3rd round pick who's coming off an injury who also has lay claim to that. You have Taylor Hawkins, who at San Diego State, my alma mater, played great football. Like, yeah, there's a little bit of competition, but there's only one spot for a backup role. And you think that the Barnacle, Kyle Shanahan likes to go with people who he trusts. Are they really going to give it to a rookie where Deontay Johnson can play multiple roles in a pinch,
Right.
who has proven that he's been able to be a serviceable DB? Like, to me, I don't think that there is a competition here other than the fact that if somebody blows somebody away in camp, if Leon O'Neal comes in and they say, hey, Barnacle, it's been a nice ride. You're over 30-something years old. Enjoy your retirement. That there's no spots open.
There's not, but the nice thing about the Barnacle is, like, I mean, you could probably sign him back at some point. Not a
He
shot at
always sticks
Dante,
around.
just the reality that he is the Barnacle. Like, he'll be there, he'll be available. Chris Royal coming in before we shift over to offense with the super chat. He is a sneakerhead here on the channel saying, I'm not buying Cleveland has zero interest in Jimmy. This did come out today. There was some beat reporter for Cleveland. I can't reference the exact writer that it was, but basically intimating that no, the Browns have sort of done that research and right now are not interested. I am not buying that. I do think out of those 4 teams that we listed, I view Cleveland as the sole suitor right now for someone who might still make a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo as opposed to waiting for him to be cut. So I am on board with Chris Royal here in pointing out that I believe Cleveland is still a viable destination.
Yeah, I think it solely depends on and I think they have a certain amount of games.
Yes.
Like I said before.
The number of
is it 6, 8, 10, 14? Is it whatever it is for the Browns? Like, who knows? But if they are fully suspended, if he is fully suspended for the year, you got to believe that Jimmy's of servitude. In fact, yeah, aliens got the ransom on multiple people.
yeah.
Or random.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
The aliens gotcha. Fat is just projecting as to why the screen went dark for Randon. He was getting prepped for the offensive camp battles because they are fierce. They are real fierce. Let's start with running back. This one's intriguing to me because, quite honestly, it's super hard to predict the whole way down. You don't know whether it's going to be Elijah Mitchell or TDP, who is technically running back 1 by the end of the season. It may change halfway through the season. The Niners are likely to go with the hot hand approach, a 3-headed running back. You don't know whether Trey Sermon is making the 53-man roster or could potentially lead the frickin' team in rushing yards this season. Like, that's a mystery. Is Jeff Wilson Jr. going to be the 4th body on this running back roster, or will Jordan Mason make his way onto the team? That one is admittedly the most fascinating to me. I have labeled the first 3 in Elijah Mitchell, Ty Davis-Price, and Trey Sermon as being the most likely to be part of a 3-headed monster. Similar to 2019, I view the carries as coming out relatively even towards the end of the year. That may be a result of splitting carries to the hot hand, may also be a result of a few games missed due to injury. Running back position is certainly susceptible to that. So what's more fascinating to me is who claims that 4th spot. Do the Niners want a veteran in Jeff Wilson Jr., who by all accounts looks sharper in practices so far this year than he did coming back from injury, that knee injury that he had in training camp last year? Or do you see enough in the young running back to bump out, to edge out the veteran and lay claim to the 53-man roster there? That's the one I'm most in tune with, is the spot for the 4th running back. What fascinates you most about this camp battle?
I think you got to go with the younger guys. And I'm not saying that Jeff Wilson is old. He's 26, but like,
that is funny. The older guy, that 26-year-old.
For me, it's just like, okay, well, you have Mitchell here. You obviously were not confident in him enough. You drafted a 3rd-round running back. So I think TDP coming off the top rope is going to be in the offense. So, like, where is all this going? Like, is Shanahan going to trade Sermon away to a team that still believe he has clout, right? Because you could make the argument, like, if I'm arguing with you for another team, we're both GMs, you'd be like, hey, Sermon, top 3 pick. We thought he could be a feature in our offense. It didn't work out. He got concussions. Elijah Mitchell was a 1,000-yard rusher in 10 games. We just don't have a spot for him. Like, that could be an interesting, like, okay, you get a 6th or 7th round pick, right, for Sermon, right?
Yeah,
like
he just needs a reset. He needs a new scene, new home, and he'll be fine.
Give an opportunity. Yes, exactly. And so, like, for me, this way, it's like, okay, yeah, I could see a triple there. But ultimately, what does Shanahan do? he just rides the hot hand and he rides that person in the ground. That's why there's been a different leading rusher every year of his tenure.
Yeah.
Is because they just take the hot hand and ride it in. And Mitchell was that person. Mitchell wasn't even getting first team reps in the last week of training camp.
No, it's wild.
And Sermon was in the doghouse. And so Mitchell just got the opportunity because Mostert got injured. If Mostert didn't get injured, Mostert would have had 25 carries in that game. Like, it wouldn't have been a discussion for a lot for Mitchell because
right.
But the injury gave it up, and luckily we were playing a dog crap opponent in the Detroit Lions that he just ran all over them, and then he got the job, and he was a producer going forward. So the doghouse bit Sermon. Like, if that was Sermon wasn't in the doghouse, you're talking about 200 yards for him.
Yeah,
and then he would have been the guy.
Right.
So I mean, I know there's probably people in the chat that are fantasy football fans. I'm a fantasy football fan. Take a running back of Shanahan's offense late in the draft.
Yeah.
Take Ty Davis-Price, take Sermon in your last pick, because there's a chance that he just Elijah Mitchell, you came to camp with your ribs not healed up enough from me running you 25 carries into the ground. I'm going somebody else. It never fails.
You could draft Mr. Irrelevant and end up with 1,000-yard rusher. That is absolutely the case if you just take a flyer on one of those. I want to bring in a couple of comments here. Amp, the Carolina Niner, pointing out, don't forget about JaMychal Hasty. I just don't think he has a chance to crack this roster as I currently see it. CJ Gray, I have to agree in that he says that running back 2 is an interesting competition. I don't think we'll actually know who's running back 2 until we look at the end of the year with the stats and say he was running back 2 because of the number of carries that he got. Because I think Randon is right.
I don't think it's running back 2. I think it's running back 1. I really think that Elijah Mitchell is not the guaranteed leader in carries.
Right. No, I don't either. I think it's a toss up. I have to
one injury, one wrong practice, one missed block in scrimmages could lead to somebody taking this lead, and Shanahan runs that person in the ground. If he loved Mitchell so much, they're not taking a third-round running back. They're just not.
Probably true.
It's way open, in my opinion.
Yeah, it certainly speaks to how he feels about the combination of Sermon and Mitchell being back there in needing to take TDP this time around.
Now, what I've been saying all for this whole camp battle is that there is an incumbent. Mitchell is the incumbent. So he will get all the opportunity to seize that job. But I think this is the most open. I think it's the most open.
I feel with TDP being drafted where he was, this is the most open. Yes, I agree. Elijah gets the slight lead there, but I think this one's easier to crack. I do want to point out, Raphael 562 Niners. I was asked on the mailbag yesterday what score I thought Madden was going to give for Elijah Mitchell. I picked 79 overall, and it comes out as an 80. I feel vindicated, Randon. My prediction skills are on point yet again.
Hey, you're the champ for a reason.
I'm very, very excited about that. Arbitrary picking. Let's talk a little bit about the training camp battle between the wide receiver spots 3 through 5. 3 seems pretty set. The way in which Jauan Jennings finished last year, the remarkable statistics of number of touchdowns and third down receptions that went for first down, the percentage of his catches that accounted for those milestones was just ridiculous. He's had players and coaches raving about him this offseason. Seems to be putting in the work that Shanahan likes to see from young players ascending. It reminds me in some ways of the positivity of Kendrick Bourne, whom I always thought Kyle Shanahan had a soft spot for. So I would assume in a similar personality type that Shanahan may like Jauan Jennings as well. Seems to glow about him when speaking about him. So for me, the most exciting one is Ray McLeod and Danny Gray. I foresee this as both contributing and it potentially not mattering which one is wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 5. If I'm honest about this competition between the two, what feels most relevant to it is Danny Gray's ability to catch and Ray's ability to hold on to the ball. Those two things feel like they will decide who gets more statistical prowess by the end of the year.
I think they're all 3 different players.
Very much so.
So what does Shanahan want? Right? You have McLeod that has that Trent Taylor type build, who was featured a lot in their offense. I mean, he has 1 billion catches for 30 yards. He just catches all those short passes and is shifty enough to get a first down here and there. Jennings seems like the the edge for the red zone, right? Because
Right.
everybody's saying that he can manipulate his body. He's good at separating in the short areas. He's got a massive catch radius. So it seems like he'd have the incumbent status. They drafted Gray with a high pick, and he has burner speed. If you look at Marquise Goodwin in his second year, like in 2018, I think it was 46 catches for like 380, something like that. Like you could see that to where he gets featured just enough, right? Or targets, not catches, targets. I think it was targets. Anyway, so 40 something, right? Just enough to be relevant and then catch a little bit of touchdowns when he's able to hold the ball and beat out guys because he has got that massive speed. I don't think there's going to be a clear-cut number 3. I think Jennings is going to be on the roster as a 3, but the game plan based on the opponent, Shanahan has always shown that he wants to win more than he wants to be loyal to his players.
That's a fact.
And so if the team has shitty DBs where they can't run, like Gray is going to get the snug there. If you have Ray McLeod who can outmaneuver the slot, he's going to get. And if you have a big slot, like I think all those guys are going to be rotational. I think Jennings will get 80% of the snaps to start the season. And we all love the way he ended the season, but they did draft a wide receiver for a reason. Whether that is because for future considerations or this season is unknown, but I think it's still something to talk about.
I think you're spot on in saying that Shanahan will absolutely take advantage of matchup advantages for the 49ers. And so if they do have an advantage with speed, you're going to see Danny Gray getting more receptions in that game. For Ray, it's not top end speed, but it's definitely a short area quickness where he excels. And I could see that.
Special teams. He's going to make the roster for special teams.
He's certainly making the roster. All of those guys are for sure locks in my opinion to make it. I agree with Chris Royal coming in with the super chat here in that I think Jennings might lead all receivers in touchdowns this year. You have heard consistently people are talking about his ability to separate. He is a big bodied guy. You would look for that sort of a safety valve in the red zone. I could certainly see him breaking out as leading in touchdowns. I like what you're saying about the rotation between these 3 wide receivers. I do agree that they will all add value. I believe at the end of the season, when you look back on targets and attempts, that Jauan Jennings will most likely lead by a fair margin in that regard. I think looking back on the 2022 season, it will be easy to label him as the number 3 wide receiver, but certainly concede the point that there will be entire games where matchup dictates that one of the others is more of a primary 3rd wide receiver in that particular matchup.
Yeah, I'm looking in the crystal ball here. And I'm thinking, like, you look at Trey Lance's eyes, they're aggressive.
Yeah. I saw you tweeting that out, and I love that assertion today.
They're very aggressive. They like to look downfield, and people are like, okay, well, Deebo Samuel's not a downfield threat. Why? Maybe because Jimmy Garoppolo is the worst quarterback in the NFL throwing outside the numbers.
Potentially.
Why is Ayuk not a downfield threat? Well, because the same reason. So you can make 2 assertions here. Either the fact that those receivers aren't good at those abilities, and that's why they drafted Gray because they need a downfield threat. And so because Trey Lance is aggressive and throwing downfield, Danny Gray will have the edge. Or you could say Jennings now solidifies the middle of the field and you allow the abilities of Samuel and Ayuk to stretch the field because you drafted them high in the draft to do so. So there's 2 different ideologies there. And I think maybe you could have a hybrid, but what do you gravitate to? Sorry, I was looking for an adjective there or a noun, but gravitate's not. I don't know. We're an hour 30 into this.
Down a grammar route here, Randon. Don't start us down that frickin' path.
I had 2 weeks off. We're an hour 30 into this. Give me a break.
All right, I agree with you on that one. Let's transition. Let's hit these last couple topics and get ourselves some rest, Randon. We got to wrap this thing up. Tight end 2. This one's just intriguing to me. I just want to hit on this because I touched on it yesterday. I actually think that Charlie Warner has a healthy chance to remain tight end 2. It felt like he locked down that spot on the second half of the season, down the stretch last year. I have predicted that Ross Dwelley isn't going to make this 53-man roster and that Tanner Hudson sneaks in his stead. How do you see the tight end room shaking out? Do you have a front runner that you think is going to make that list?
Well, Warner seems like the odds end favorite to do that because I think they're going to want to run the football. I think they're going
Yeah.
to want to take it out of Trey Lance's hands, at least for the beginning.
And he
And
is the best blocking
he's the
tight
best
end,
run
right?
blocker.
Yeah.
But I look at Croft here at 6'6", 250, 8-year veteran. They brought him in for a reason. I think that you could see him trying to sneak some tight end 2 numbers away because he's a decent blocker. He's a good pass catcher. He's been a tight end 1 in a lot of offenses, not great tight end 1, but he has been that role.
Very serviceable numbers for a tight end too, though.
Yeah. So then you're like, okay, if Kittle gets injured, which he has been, who's the guy that I feel most comfortable with being a combination of a pass catcher and a run blocker? And I think you look at Tyler Kroft as that kind of guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly the veteran presence, the track record of success, that could be a name where you see him making the 53-man roster. That's one to keep an eye on. The most fascinating one on the offensive side.
Why do you feel Hudson? Why do you feel Hudson?
Hudson, it comes back to similar reasons of why fans continually called for Ross Dwelley, that Ross Dwelley within training camp continues to flash these great hands, come down with these spectacular catches, and has not been able to translate that in the regular season. Tanner Hudson did much the same with Tampa Bay and now is here in San Francisco. So it's a similar set of circumstances. I had previously been on the Ross Dwelley train. I'm now deboarding and boarding the Tanner Hudson hype train. So that's currently where I'm at. And I'm the lead conductor on the Tanner Hudson hype train for tight end 2/tight end 3. It's a very small train to be on, my friend.
Nice stop in Monaco. You had a good meal and then you're on your road.
Excellent meal. Yeah. Caviar, you name it. All right. Offensive line is where we're closing this thing out. Hey, I got to say, like, when the news of a potential first rounder coming in was broken today, I thought maybe offensive lineman, primarily because it was Brad Graham who broke it and he loves offensive linemen. So I thought maybe he had the insight there. And I was going to get into this whole rant of like, what would that mean if the Niners brought in someone this late in camp? Is that a signal of how they feel about Daniel Brunskill or Jake Brendel coming in at center? But it wasn't a lineman. It was a lineman. It was a defensive lineman. It was not an offensive lineman. The Niners do feel set at this position. I'm still unclear as to will the starting 5 just matriculate from who they say it's going to be. Will it be Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Daniel Brunskill, and Mike McGlinchey? If it's that, I have fewer worries because I feel like we have a very deep room there. Again, a lot of names I'd like to stick on this roster. A couple of new names added in through the draft that I'm excited about, along with depth that I had been excited about from years past. Jalen Moore, Justin School. You have the gentleman who filled in at tackle, who's currently escaping me, that we signed 2 years ago. Anyway, you have depth there. If that starting 5 is solidified right off of the bat, then I feel good about it. If you start seeing them playing around with formations and it turns out Jake Brendel isn't the guy they're trying to sell us on and center is the hole in that line, all of a sudden I'm less thrilled with depth and more concerned with who are the starting 5. And by the way, McKivitz is the name that was escaping me earlier. So I see good depth. I'm not clear on the starters here.
Yeah, I think they're selling us some stuff. I think Brendel and a lot of people are his offensive acumen. Sure, he's been a veteran for a long time. I hope he's smart about how to play offensive line. But the realistic nature is that he hasn't started for any team for a long period of time. Like, he's been a journeyman, like going
yes, he has.
And the number one, unsigned rookie or whatever was Donovan West. Like, they paid him the most money. And so I don't want to put on my tinfoil hat, but I'm going to. On the Niners website, under their roster, he's the only person on the roster listed as a pure center.
That is wild.
So Brendel isn't a center. He's OL. He's offensive line. And so, like, they view him. Do they view West as the center? Like, this views to me as like Brendel has 3 games and that's it. And this might hurt the offensive line because you can't have a center only as a backup. You need lots of hybrids that can play multiple positions. And West isn't that. Is West going to get the training camp time to prove that he can beat him out. Like, he was chosen as his talent in the position, but he was only like 280 in college. He's listed as 300, so maybe he's put on weight, but he's light. And so, like, what is this really going to be in camp? Is like Brendel going to get all the reps? Is Wes going to get, is it going to be 50-50? Like, what do you envision this being?
I mean, from the sounds of it, it appears that it's another situation where it's Jake Brendel's situation to lose, right? It is his position to lose. He's coming in. I would envision him getting a lot of the first team reps. I will say this about Donovan West. I mean, that is an interesting observation. When I go to ESPN's depth chart, he is listed right behind Jake Brendel as the second string a center in there. And so even there, he is viewed as the backup to Brendel, even if, you know, as you talk about there, even if the Niners don't view it as such. I would see this as a scenario where if Donovan West came in and claimed that starting job, I would breathe a sigh of relief because the Niners did not prioritize bringing him in, right? Could have drafted him, could have spent one of those draft picks on him, and instead chanced it and waited until he was a free agent and risked losing him. Now, they did prioritize signing him once he became an unrestricted free agent. But that would be worrisome to me. If we start playing with that starting lineup for the offensive line, I will start to fret about the 49ers this season because that feels like a huge potential weakness that could be a non-story. If, as they said, it sort of is the chalk lineup where Brendel is the starter there, and you have Aaron Banks stepping back into his left guard spot and reclaiming that. He's reformed his body. He's now solid there. Brunskill obviously has shown he can be a capable starter at right guard. McGlinchey obviously has shown he can be a capable starter at right tackle, and Trent Williams is the best of the best. So in that case, I'm not worried about it, but this is absolutely something I'm going to have my eye on in camp. And it is one of, a shitload of battles I'm going to have my eye on in camp. And next week, Randon, we're going to be talking about camp. Baby, it is here. Feels great, baby.
Real football. Let's do it.
It's perfect timing, Randon. I'm now into witness protection mode. That little sun streak is going to get larger and larger in back of me. I will need to turn up my lights to combat it, but we have reached the end of our show here. If you're still watching right now, please consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and looking down below in the description of the video to follow Randon as well. You can follow him and subscribe on Cerberus Sports on YouTube. You can follow him on Twitter. You can sign up for the Hockey Royalty Podcast. Randon's got all sorts of stuff going on. Randon, what type of stuff do you have coming up in the near future, my good sir?
Well, it's all Hockey Royalty all the time right now. So we're talking about the draft. We're talking about upcoming guys. We might be getting some players or people from the player development staff talking about all these guys coming up and how they're being trained and the ins and outs of player development within the hockey program. So it should be pretty good if we get those guests.
Boom. I look forward to it, Randon. Always good shows. You put forth fantastic content. As always, a pleasure having you on here, my friend.
It's been way too long, my man.
Yes.
I missed you, man. I missed you.
Amp the Carolina Niners saying it right. Great show, guys. Keep the content coming. We will. We absolutely will. We'll be back next week. You heard where Randon's on next. I will have the Sneakerhead call-in show tomorrow at 5 p.m. Until then, cheers, faithful.